12 injured as three-story building under construction collapses in Lagos. National Drug Law Enforcement Agency (NDLEA) reveals 14 million Nigerians 15 to 64 use hard drugs. In international news, U.S.-China trade tensions expected to feature most at Osaka G20 summit. And in sport, FIFA defends video assistant referee review system ahead of Women's World Cup quarterfinals.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Lagos has experienced another building collapse, and this time a three-story building under construction in Fagba area of the city. 12 persons were injured when the uncompleted building came down on Wednesday night. Chief Executive Officer of Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, LASEMA, Dr. Olufemi Osaintolu, says people occupying the building have been evacuated and the injured are being treated in area hospitals, and no one died in the incident. The federal government says it will move against any security agency that is found complicit in the torture of suspects in custody. Solicitor General of the Federation and Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Justice, Dayo Akpata, says the government will henceforth pay attention to the enforcement of international conventions against torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishments to which Nigeria is a party. Akpata, currently in charge of the Justice Ministry, made the declaration at a ceremony commemorating the 2019 United Nations Day in support of victims of torture. Akpata says this convention is an important step in the process of globalizing human rights and acknowledging treatments, the torture, inhumane and degrading treatments that are not permitted even in times of war. And Chairman, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Issa Sage, SAN, has asked Senate President Ahmed Lawan to stop misleading Nigerians on the exact monthly salary of Nigerian senators. Yesterday, ANN reported that Dr. Lawan had told a group from the Senators Forum while debunking rumors of jumbo pay for senators that his monthly salary as a Senate President was 750,000 naira. In that same breath, he alluded to the fact that his office must be well funded, but did not say by how much. Professor Sage says senators earn 15 million naira monthly and not 750,000 naira, as claimed by Lawan. Sage says Lawan was only speaking half-truth because everyone knew that the bulk of the money earned by senators was embedded in their allowances. Sage said presiding officers of the National Assembly earned more than ordinary members. The PACAC chairman, who was the first to expose the jumbo pay of federal lawmakers, said he was still trying to ascertain the allowances of principal officers. National Drug Law Enforcement Agency (NDLEA) says more than 14 million Nigerians from 15 to 64 years old use hard drugs. Benue State Commander of the NDLEA, Florence Ezonye, made this known on Wednesday in commemoration of the 2019 International Day Against Drug Abuse and Trafficking. Ezonye says the agency has arrested more than 100 suspects, including 9 females, with about 500 kilograms of Indian hemp, while 47 kilograms of psychiatric substances were seized in the last 1 year. The Police Service Commission will start screening more than 200,000 shortlisted applicants for recruitment into the constable cadre of the Nigeria Police Force beginning on Monday. The exercise will hold for a month in the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory. Shortlisted candidates were part of the 10,000 Nigerians the Commission plans to recruit into the force as approved by President Muhammadu Buhari. Commission spokesman Ikechukwu Ani says invitation letters had been emailed to the applicants, and Niger State had the highest number of applicants with more than 12,000 shortlisted for screening. Lagos had the least with just 1,300. President of the Nigerian Union of Allied Health Professionals, Dr. Obinna Ogbonna, has called on President Muhammadu Buhari not to limit the selection of the two ministers of health to just within the ranks of the Nigerian Medical Association alone. Ogbonna says it would be fair to all stakeholders in the health sector if the appointments were shared between the NMA and other allied health unions in the sector. Ogbonna says this would also establish balance of power among all stakeholders. He added that one of the recommendations of a panel set up by the federal government in 2014 was the Minister of Health and Minister of State for Health should not come from the NMA alone. Coming up, African stories. Internationally recognized government in Libya recaptures Ghanaian town near Tripoli. And later, international news. U.S.-China trade tensions expected to take center stage at Osaka G20 summit. Welcome back. This is CNN News. Now to stories from around Africa. Double whammy in Tunisia today as the country's leader, 92-year-old President Beji Caid Essebsi, was said to be in critical condition. At the same time, double suicide attacks shook Tunisia's capital on Thursday. The presidency announced that Essebsi has been transferred to the military hospital in Tunis. Essebsi is Tunisia's first democratically elected president who came to power in 2014, 3 years after the Arab Spring uprising toppled longtime dictator Zayn El Abidine Ben Ali and sparked revolt in several Arab nations. And Libya's internationally recognized government says it has retaken the strategic town of Gaya following clashes with insurgent forces. Gaya was the main supply base for an offensive on the capital, Tripoli, by Libyan National Army. The fighters led by General Khalifa Haftar. LMA has not yet confirmed the loss of Gaya, and dozens have died since the group began its campaign earlier this year against the UN-backed government of National Accord led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj. Libya has been torn by violence and division since longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi was deposed and killed in 2011. And Zimbabwe's health ministry has reassured persons living with HIV in the country that there is enough antiretroviral drugs in stock to last till the first quarter of next year. But most of those who need those drugs have no confidence in the assurance. The poor state of the economy is said to have hit the health sector hard. A local watchdog, Citizen Health Watch, has been reporting for some time that 90% of healthcare institutions in the country do not have essential medicines in stock, and there have been sporadic shortages of ARV drugs, which are supposed to be free for HIV patients in public hospitals. And reporter Farai Uwakutuya has more.
Despite repeated assurances from the government that there's no need to panic, people living with HIV are worried because the supply situation is deteriorating.
On a normal scale, you'll find that clients in care receive up to 3 months supply of ARVs. But in this instance, they're receiving a month's supply and others even weeks supply. So that means that there's that shortage. Clients are not able to get their meds, the required 3 months. They're getting far much less than they should be getting.
But the health ministry maintains the same line it repeated in emailed responses to our questions. For our main first line, which caters for over 95% of the population taking ARVs, we have enough stocks to last up to the first quarter of 2020. For patients who fail first line, we switch them to second line, and for these second line ARV medicines, we have stocks that will last us up to the fourth quarter of this year. It does, however, acknowledge it's yet to make a $6 million contribution to the Global Fund, leaving it dangerously close to missing out on a $400 million annual grant that will keep the supplies of ARVs coming. That could plunge Zimbabwe's HIV response into crisis, undoing decades of progress made in lowering deaths and expanding access to treatment. The challenge, like most of Zimbabwe's problems, is a shortage of foreign currency to meet international payments. The health ministry is engaging Treasury to allocate the foreign currency needs sooner rather than later. Any delay could leave many in danger.
And without ARVs, there's issues of people defaulting on treatment. And once people default on treatment, there are issues of resistance. And if not issues of resistance, it's death.
There are about 1.2 million people living with HIV in Zimbabwe who are dependent on antiretroviral treatment.
And Ghana Public Utilities Regulatory Commission has approved an 11% electricity tariff increase from next month. The Commission says the hike would help to sustain the financial viability of utility service providers and ensure the delivery of quality service to consumers. But Ghanaian businesses have a different take on the increase. Nabil Ahmed Rafai has the details.
Keeping the lights on in Stephen Efa's beauty salon means paying for electricity. The government has increased the tariff by 11.17% to take effect next month, and Efa is worried that's going to be too high for him to make ends meet.
Business is slow these days. The increment in electricity tariff is too much. It will affect our business.
This shop pays $55 for electricity every month. The new rates mean it will have to pay $61 to use the same amount of power.
For now, barbers here say they have to pass the extra cost on to customers, but they also want to see a stable power supply.
The power supply across Ghana has been especially erratic since January. Regulators of utilities in Ghana say the hike in tariff will allow the power distributors to generate more income, which would help them supply more reliable power to consumers.
There would always be a demand for quality because we are paying for a service. The PRC, after passing the tariff, does not go back to bed. When we approve a tariff and announce it like this to be effective, then we go onto the system and we start monitoring, because these proposals that the utility companies submitted included some cost components that the Commission has to be sure that they really invest the money in the cost component or on the cost component that they included in the tariff.
The Public Utilities Regulatory Commission says this is the last major tariff adjustment for the next 2 years. But Stephen Efa and other business owners say the increase coming next month will create hardships for them, and they want the regulator to consider a lower tariff adjustment for businesses instead of a flat figure for all consumers. He says that will help businesses like his trim off excessive losses.
When we return, international news. U.S.-China trade tensions expected to take center stage at Osaka G20 summit. And later, sport. FIFA defends VAR ahead of Women's World Cup quarterfinals.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. We go to stories from around the world. Thousands of Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza Strip on Wednesday to protest against the economic worship workshop organized by the United States in Bahrain. The demonstrations, for which the High Commission of the Great Arch of Return had called, included all Palestinian factions. The protest took place in front of the headquarters of the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, or Palestine refugees in the center of Gaza City, and went toward the United Nations headquarters in the west of Gaza. Participants in the demonstrations held black flags and banners, some of which read, "Together to drop the deal of the century. The Bahrain conference will fail, and Palestine and Jerusalem are not for sale." The U.S.-led two-day workshop, which closed on Wednesday in the Bahrain capital of Manama, discussed the White House $50 billion economic blueprint for the Palestinians, the economic part of U.S. administration's Middle East peace plan, better known as the deal of the century. The G20 summit kicks off in Osaka, Japan on Friday, and this is the 14th meeting of the Group of 20 and the first to be held in Japan. Many global economic issues, especially the trade tensions between the U.S. and China, will take center stage.
For the economy, but also so much more, the G20, representing more than 80% of global GDP, have their say each year. Its stated goal is to build an inclusive and a sustainable world by trying to resolve global issues. And this year, a number of major issues will be on the table. First of all, the trade war between China and the U.S. It is currently the biggest factor affecting the development of the world economy. Experts believe that a comprehensive trade war, escalating from confrontations over tariffs, will have a vast negative impact on global demand.
I believe what should top the agenda at this year's G20 summit in Osaka is for world leaders to reverse the damage done by protectionism and to reassert the importance of free trade. They need to figure out specific measures to promote trade liberalization.
The talks between the two biggest economies have been in deadlock since the U.S. government has been inconsistent in regards to deals the two parties once agreed on. So the possible one-on-one meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump is attracting worldwide attention.
I think there's two things we would all hope for. One is a good meeting between President Trump and President Xi, that both China and the US put their negotiations on a positive track, that they're talking to each other, and so that we can see a path to resolution. And I think the second thing we'll all be looking to see is a commitment from the G20 to supporting the multilateral rules-based trading system. Because as important as the US and China are, there's a lot of other countries in the world. And those other countries, the interests of those other countries are supported by international rules.
Next, eyes will be on the cracks in the European Union. Experts point out that anti-EU sentiment in some EU countries has clearly increased. At a time when anti-EU sentiment is increasing, data shows the EU is beginning to show signs of slowing economic growth. In 2019, G20 leaders clearly have a lot of issues to tackle. But the question is, what contributions can they agree upon to resolve these issues?
A guest at a conference in Auckland, New Zealand, earlier this week said New Zealand is willing to be more active in building links between China and South American countries under the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. When Poland reports on how the Southern Link would impact commerce and better New Zealand's accessing road resources and markets in the global cooperation.
A traditional Maori welcome greeted international delegates who came to explore future trade links between Asia and South America. A bold move by New Zealand to take advantage of its strong trade and cultural relationships across the Pacific, and China seems to like it.
This exciting idea fits well with the key features of the Belt and Road Initiative, namely connectivity, openness, and inclusiveness.
Situated midway between Asia and South America, New Zealand is the quickest route between the two continents.
We know that our Chinese friends want to expand out to South America across the southern part of the Pacific. We know that our friends in South America want to reconnect back with China in the same way. So New Zealand is ideally positioned as a hub and a conduit.
The difference in travel times is significant. Exporting through New Zealand takes up to 36 hours, compared to between 4 and 7 days through either Europe or the United States.
It's more economical, it has a better carbon footprint, but most importantly, and Alibaba being the dominant e-commerce platform, Jack Ma's vision is that people in the world should be able to receive their goods in 48 hours.
The aim of the Southern Link Conference is to identify the challenges and the opportunities of creating new links between China and South America. And it's also the first big step toward the development of an action plan to promote future Belt and Road cooperation.
Increased tourism is a major opportunity, and there was a bold prediction about future flows from China over the next decade.
How many people? 200 million. Oh, 200 million. Mind to fly, come and back.
Coordinating air services, fast-tracking visas and smoothing trade regulations are among the many challenges. But one trade expert says the Southern Link ticks all the political boxes.
In a sense, the Southern Link is already there. It's happening and it's been going for some time. I think really our job now is to try and find ways to turbocharge it.
Some say it's a dream, but the operational target is just 2 years away when New Zealand hosts an APEC conference in 2021.
Up next, sports. FIFA defends video assistant referee review system ahead of Women's World Cup quarterfinals. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Super Eagles coach General and Nigerians are elated after the team became the first to qualify for the second round of the Africa Cup of Nations when they beat Guinea 1-0 in Alexandria on Wednesday. Kenneth Omera's 73rd minute header scored the only goal that moved the Super Eagles into the round of 16. Former Golden Eaglets coach Godwin Izilian and head coach of Bender Insurance FC of Benin, Baldwin Bazuye, have urged the team to improve on their tactical play in future matches. The Super Eagles take on Madagascar next on Sunday. FIFA has defended its VAR review system, saying referees had reached a 98% accuracy rate in decision-making during the group stage of the Women's World Cup in France. The video assistant referee system has made a controversy-filled debut in the women's game at World Cup level, baffling players and coaches and frustrating fans. Scotland and Nigeria exited the tournament after their opponents were awarded penalty retakes when VAR ruled their goalkeepers had stepped centimeters off their line. When France knocked out Brazil in the last 16, 3 goals were disallowed following reviews. A French sports newspaper described VAR's interventions as incomprehensible. Incomprehensible indeed. And that is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.